So, good afternoon. It's wonderful to be with Bob Foster, the Clear-Com President and IABM member. Bob, how's it going in sunny San Francisco or close to San Francisco?
It's going well. Summertime in California is always a little bit of a mixed bag. In our area, it's cold mornings, sunny afternoons, and so far, summer's looking good. I think it's been a relatively calm, weather-wise, relatively calm period. Later in the summer, we start worrying about fires, but at this point, we're still feeling optimistic.
Well, we definitely hope you stay safe with the potentials around that. I mean, it's been pretty devastating what's been happening, over the last few years. So, yeah, be well, be safe.
Thanks.
Um, But for today, it's interesting. We've started talking around the changes in our industry, and one of the key themes or terms that you came up with, which I think is fantastic, is this whole broadcast-ish. So we're no longer just in the world of broadcasting or broadcasters. There's such a thing as broadcast-ish. So I'd love you to expand on that and tell me, what does that term mean to you, Bob?
Sure. Well, I think people have been talking about for a while audiovisual to broadcast convergence, right? And the idea that these things are coming together. Well, first of all, that doesn't flow off the tongue very smoothly. Secondly, it doesn't capture the imagination, I don't think, in the right way. I think if we're trying to explain what we as people who are manufacturers on the broadcasting side can bring to the customers, we need something that's a little bit more pithy, a little bit more feels like we're part of it with them, which I think is historically the way that these things work the best, right? With collaboration between the inventor and the customer, right? So broadcast-ish to me is sort of it's a little bit like a marketing turn of phrase when you trying to put into a bag a number of things, but the basic idea is we have a bunch of cool tools that help people solve problems. And you on the AV side, your problems are getting more sophisticated. Your needs are becoming more demanding. There's competition amongst different kinds of solutions and different kinds of technologies. We're familiar with those challenges as manufacturers in the broadcasting space, and we can help you come up with a solution that's somewhat bespoke for your requirements that'll be different from what we would deliver to a broadcaster, but also different from what historically you might have used in the audiovisual end user side. And I think this covers a lot of different sub markets in the audiovisual segment, but I think it's a very real, it's sort of it's a challenge all of us are going through. Just at Clear-Com, we've happened to have the luck of having good business on both sides of this line for a number of years, maybe even decades, and that's positioned us well to learn these lessons maybe ahead of some of our peers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the key points, isn't it? That you have the experience and the knowledge of doing this for broadcasters in the media industry. But we're finding more and more there's plenty of, other vertical markets, whether that's corporate, house of worship, education, even retail, that really want to deliver high quality audio visual, and it's beyond just doing it on a cell phone. It's creating some kind of workflow that works for them to create and deliver engaging content to their audiences. So I mean, I've seen this sort of really developing, particularly sort of since COVID, and obviously we all went into lockdown. But I'd love to know, when did you first see this sort of trend appearing for Clear-Com in terms of the need to have high quality, fantastic content that is enabled in the way that, typical media or broadcasters have used, but widening into new markets and new verticals.
Sure. Well, fortunately enough, in my experience with Clear-Com, I started as a frontline salesperson here, so I was solving problems for customers very directly, and that's really where my background is in this business. And I found a few verticals or sub verticals where we've seen a lot of this kind of these what I would call broadcast workflows coming into an AV space. The biggest one of which is the idea of connecting together multiple teams in our case, we provide communication. So multiple teams needing to communicate to pull off a production that is happening in multiple places. Well, this is
Yeah.
a very common broadcast workflow. We all know how sports broadcasting works. There's certainly news events that work in this direction. So we've been doing this for a long time and understand the requirements of it. Well, certainly as I was coming up with solutions for customers like Google, Hitachi, let's see who are some other ones. Autodesk, major corporate customers that had big groups. The people at Walmart Labs, for instance,
Yeah.
customers that have big offices in multiple geographies where they need to bring people together to produce some kind of event that crosses over these multiple geographies. Became something very dynamic and really a powerful requirement, and something we knew how to do and knew how to solve problems for the people. They were a bit surprised, I think, in some of them, because many of them had thought historically of Clear-Com as maybe a smaller scale, fixed location, party line based solution. But actually, in fact, we had all the pieces to connect these locations together over IP, even make point-to-point communications possible over IP connections, integrate a lot of different outside technologies into those solutions. And these customers really, like, they picked up this workflow and ran with it. So we've seen a lot of growth in this area. That same challenge has also arrived for us on the House of Worship side. House of Worship at the larger scale was getting into this even before COVID, because you were starting to see the House of Worship in the US model going from these super massive single church solutions into, actually, I'm 7 churches in across a, 100-mile geographic area with things scattered together, that I bring all these people together for this church experience every Sunday. I need to link those teams together so that presentation is happening as one thing, and those people feel like they're part of a thing with all 7 locations. Well, Clear-Com can facilitate that. And again, that's kind of a broadcast related workflow or requirement coming into House of Worship. And then COVID arrived, of course, and House of Worship turned into an activity that was purely over streaming for a period of time.
Yeah.
So that was, again, another thing that we could facilitate for people, and did quite a bit of in that space. And again, that's something else that came from from a broadcasting based workflow. So we've seen this over and over. It happens in different kinds of areas, and really the critical thing is not making the assumption that somebody wants to work the way that you think they want to work. Going into the conversation and saying to them, well, if you could have anything you wanted in terms of a communication system, what would that be? And then listening to their answers and
Yeah.
pulling out of it the things that you have in your bag of tricks that come from your different tools that you use in different market areas. And I think this is simple salesmanship, or salespersonship, I guess, to be more correct. But as we all know, that's what we should be doing with our customers anyway. But really using, an open mind, so you're not just thinking about it through the lens of, oh, the last 4 things like this I did this way, so this 5th one must be the same, is really what the key is. Now then, once you've done that, then figuring out how to market to that, how to take that message and communicate it to the marketplace, so the marketplace more broadly can understand what you have to offer. Your channel partners can understand how to take these lessons that you've learned in one region and move it to another region. That is another whole set of challenges, and certainly one that I would say all of us face the complexities of all the time. There's a bunch of issues there with trying to solve those problems, but using the customer stories, using the customer solutions that you've created is the foundation. Everything else has to follow from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you say, Bob, it's, these verticals, House of Worship, whoever, they buy in a very different way. I mean, they don't come at it from obviously a traditional broadcast view, because they're not broadcasters. They are looking at what's the outcomes I want to achieve in terms of my content, my audience, my engagement with that content. So that really changes the dynamic of how you market, how you go to market with these wider markets. How has Clear-Com done that? How have you changed that go-to-market strategy for parallel markets outside of the broadcasting world?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is we've done a lot of work to empower the person shopping at that end user. I think that in a broadcast workflow and a broadcast sales cycle, you really have an expert in a given area. In our case, communications, but it could be some other part at the broadcaster who's the person who's responsible for that in their portfolio of responsibilities. Usually, in our case, is somebody on the audio side of the business, but it could be something else. Um, that person is an expert and should know pretty well what they want to talk about, what they want to do. Well, in our case, we need to take a solution mindset to somebody who maybe is not an expert. They
Yeah,
don't know all the language, they don't know all the building block pieces, they just know what they need to accomplish. And in that way, I would say it's a little bit more like the sales processes or cycles around selling IT products,
yeah,
right? You end up with a solution where you're bringing a complete offering to somebody. You need to know what that is, which means you might need a different kind of partner, whether that's a system integrator or reseller. But it also means you need to figure out a way to educate people within the sales process. We have done quite a lot of this through the idea of using system diagrams of different solutions to sort of map out for somebody what those challenges are so that they can visualize, hey, the system I need is going to look like this. It's going to have these components and it's going to connect together in the following ways. And that using that tool allows somebody who's a technically savvy person who needs to accomplish a thing, who is not an intercom expert, to
no.
piece together in their mind what it is they need, and then we can from there work with them to kind of put more meat on the bones. Maybe it's 12 belt packs instead of 8, maybe it's 4 transceivers instead of 2, whatever the balance is, you know, but at least we've gotten them started.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, it's looking at it from a solution perspective as opposed to a typical broadcast engineering perspective, and enabling. I love your phrase there, to empower, your buyers and educate them as to, okay, what is it you're trying to achieve here, and start from there and reverse engineer that back into a solution set that works. So based on that, what would you say are the key parts of the broadcast-ish workflow that manufacturers should be focusing on?
Well, I think the first and foremost thing is to don't make assumptions that you think you know how somebody is going to want to solve a given problem. That's the very basic thing. The next most important thing is to look for the tells when you're talking to that customer, when you're interviewing that customer, that will lead you to the unique capabilities that you've developed over a period of time, in some cases, many years, maybe on your broadcast, for your broadcast customers, that are going to map onto what people need. You know, what is that? What is the
Yeah.
thing that's gonna really turn somebody on about their system and really make a difference for them? Could be site-to-site connectivity. It could be having point-to-point communications. These are our examples, but they could be whatever. But really look for what those are and make sure you pull those out of your process. Convey them to your sales organization, convey them to your partners and resellers, right? Make
Yeah.
sure everybody's all on the same page about what are the things we're underlining here. And then make sure to kind of drive that through. And then the last one is service is really important in this model because these people are in some cases pioneering these solutions, and they don't necessarily have the same kind of infrastructure that a broadcaster would in terms of technical staff to install and configure the equipment. So commissioning is important, and commissioning the systems to make sure they're up and running and doing what they need. Training is important to train the people who are going to be managing those systems, but really making sure your resale group knows what is going to be required to get this thing in and running.
Yeah.
Cabling, power, interconnectivity to third-party systems, all of those pieces. The service part is not something you want to take for granted. You want to actually like check that checkbox as you're going through the sales cycle. So I think those are probably the big pieces. None of these are revolutionary. It's just a change of mindset, I think.
Yeah, it's a new approach to a wider market opportunity, isn't it? And I think sometimes, although it may sound sort of common sense, it's also, well, this isn't how necessarily people would understand you would sell or even buy these services. So looking at, a go-to-market that works in terms of strategic messaging that's solution-based and based on, outcomes of content distribution, content production, monetization, whatever that might be, as well as the servicing side of that and the training side. Because as you say, you're not necessarily dealing with a typical customer who has years and years of experience of using these systems alone, putting them together. So fantastic advice there, Bob. Is there any final words you would like to give any other IABM members or manufacturers in the media technology space to really take hold of the broadcast-ish opportunity?
Well, I think the biggest one is just really to listen more to people who are outside your space. It might require more engagement on your team's part to really get the messages that you need to get to do the solution selling, because you don't already know all the answers in the same way that you may in another part of your business.
Absolutely. Fantastic advice there. Bob, thank you so much. Incredible insights from Clear-Com and, fantastic market opportunities. So thank you for sharing and
Absolutely.
to you. Fantastic.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the discussion, and I hope people find it useful. And I'm looking forward to hearing other suggestions other people have from their side also. So
Absolutely wonderful. Bob Boster of Clear-Com Communications. Absolutely fantastic to talk to you. Thank you.